Welcome to day one of Career Boot Camp 2024. Today, you will learn how to elevate your career to new heights. Please note that this session will be offered in English and French simultaneously. To view the French session, please return to the Zoom lobby and join the French session. I'd like to start off with the land acknowledgement. Today, we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin people have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you're on as well. Career Boot Camp is the largest conference in the GC, and the only goal is to support you in your career journey. As we move through today's session, please share your questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. As with all FYN sessions, this session will be recorded so you can go back to check out the recordings. In addition to the recordings on our YouTube channel, we're also offering another way to learn this year, a podcast series of the Career Bootcamp sessions. After CBC, the podcast will be made available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to note that the PowerPoint presentations for each session is included on our wiki page so that you can feel free to follow along at your own rate and to improve your learning experience. Also, all the resources shared during this session will be added on our wiki page under resources. So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Natalie, and I will be your moderator for this session today. I started my career in the Government of Canada 6 years ago. Started off at Employment and Social Development Canada at an innovation lab, and years later joined ISED, where I began my Indeterminate journey with the Government of Canada. Between 2020 to 2021, I was elected to co-chair Interconnects, which is a professional network at ISED. And I really believe in the value of networking as public servants to progress our careers. Today, we have some very exciting panelists with us. But before we jump into that, I'll run through our learning objectives. So today we're going to be explaining some roles our staff use and alternative mechanisms that we use in order to kind of figure out, the eligibility criteria and become a permanent GC employee. We'll be listing the things that you can develop to prepare yourself for a permanent role with the Government of Canada. And we'll be helping you lead open conversations with your management in order to ensure that you achieve your career aspirations and that you communicate your departure respectfully as you navigate through the various opportunities that are available to you in the Government of Canada. Now, we'll also start off with a polling question. But before we jump into the polling question, I just want you all to be aware of who the three speakers are today. Robert Armstrong will be one of our speakers. He's a manager of the Human Resources Program of the Public Services and Procurement Canada. And then we have Priyanka Sharma, who is the Human Resources Advisor, co-chair of GC Students. And Jennifer McPhee, who works at the Public Service Commission of Canada. And on that note, let's jump in to the polling question. So the first polling question is, how much do you already know about this topic? So it looks like from the results that most of the participants today are somewhat familiar with sort of the staffing and hiring process, which is good that we have sort of a level playing field to sort of launch into a more in-depth discussion. We also have one more polling question that we can look at. And the second one is, have you shared your career aspirations with your manager? And from the results, we can see that many of you have, and that you're mentioning that you seem to be having quite a supportive experience. And that's also great news to hear, because you definitely can't make your way through government effectively without a supportive experience and relationship with your management. So it's great to hear that a lot of you have been able to foster that. So as I mentioned, we have three panelists today. Priyanka Sharma, as I mentioned, she is as a human resource advisor for the employee experience team at Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And she joined the public service as a student in 2019 and got bridged into a full-time position in 2020. So Priyanka, seems like you joined government quite recently, but you seem to have been building a thriving career quite quickly. So great to hear that. And our next speaker, Jennifer McPhee, who joined the public service in 2005. And she's been with several different departments in human resources in different areas of specialization. And she's, passionate about public service and the role in planning and executing outreach and engagement with job seekers and employers in order to build a diverse and inclusive public service and future. And that's great to hear that we have people like Jennifer in the government working on creating that inclusive environment for all of us. And our final speaker today, Robert Armstrong, who's based in Halifax, is manager of Human Resources Program for Public Services and Procurement Canada in the Atlantic region. And prior to joining PSPC, he spent 11 years with the Canada School of Public Service. He worked as an employee in organizational development across all departments. So Robert has years of experience working in a virtual and dispersed team prior to the pandemic, and continues to adapt virtual workplace experiences. So it looks like we have a very interesting panel today from those who have just recently joined government but have been moving forward quite quickly, to those who have been with the government of Canada for quite a long time and have been navigating a career spanning various different departments. So let's dive in to some of the questions that you might have today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for the wonderful introduction, and welcome to everybody. For those of you listening in and who do not see the slide on the screen, I'd like to describe what it says. So this slide says, why do you want to be indeterminate? A few points on the slide say job security, benefits, opportunities to move laterally. And I'm going to speak a little bit more to that. But I'd like to start off by acknowledging that the audience that we have today is going to be a mix of students, casual, part-time workers, term employees, and maybe even indeterminate employees. And it's so important to understand the benefits of becoming indeterminate, because within the federal public service, there's just so many opportunities to grow and develop in your career. But it's very normal to start off in the government of Canada working a contract or a term that has an end date. And as we go through this presentation, we will have a little bit more about the technical aspects of the types of employment and how they're staffed and what it means. But I'm going to go over just the general idea of understanding the advantages of the types of contracts that are within the federal public service. So I mentioned we're talking about being indeterminate, and one of the most important things is to understand what it means to be indeterminate. So what that means is that you have a contract that does not have an end date. And I'm going to highlight some of the advantages of what it means to work indeterminate. But before we get into that, I do want to highlight advantages of having other types of employment so that you can use that to your advantage when you are looking for indeterminate employment. So for those of you who are currently working in a fixed term contract where you have an end date and you're looking for what's next in your career, there's so many things you can gain out of this experience. So the first one being work experience. With this, there's so many benefits for young professionals looking to develop their skills and to find a field that interests them. And when I want to define young professionals. When we talk about young professionals, we're not talking about age. We're talking about those who have recently joined the federal public service. Those of you who've worked in the private and are joining new, really that taking advantage of a fixed term contract or a contract that you know has an end date is really making sure that the work experience that you have is meaningful and aligns with your career goals. So it's a great way to kind of, I'm going to go into my next point, which is test out a job. So with the ability to have a fixed term contract, you can test out the opportunity, learn about the different types of work experience, learn a little bit more about how the government is structured, the types of employment we have, and really build your path that way. And lastly, you can always have opportunity for ongoing training and learning. So for those of you who are like, well, I don't have enough time, well, take advantage of the time that you do have in your fixed term contract or as a student or casual or part-time worker to really develop skills, competencies that you know will be beneficial to you as you search for an indeterminate employment. I did see in the poll, and I do want to bring it up, that some of you haven't had the opportunity to discuss indeterminate employment with your supervisor or manager. And as Natalie mentioned, I'm the co-chair for GC students. And one of the first things we tell students is to make sure you maintain an open line of communication with your manager. So for those of you who haven't started, don't hesitate. Talk to a supervisor, a mentor, a manager about opportunities to become indeterminate. It is a better way for them to also prepare and help you and guide you into finding a role that is indeterminate for your career development. So with the advantages that I've mentioned about a fixed term contract, these are really opportunities to set yourself up for success. So take advantage of those, try to implement that in the work that you do day to day if you're not already indeterminate. You'll have the ability to make a better informed decision on the types of employment opportunities you're looking for. It'll help guide you in the types of job opportunities you're going to apply for. It'll help you understand better what the competencies are for specific job opportunities, and it'll really help you develop key items on your checklist when you do go through your career path to reach your career goals. There are so many advantages on why you would want to be indeterminate. Again, that means an employee with no end date. But I'm only going to name the top three that are in my opinion. And because I feel like I could talk about this all day long. Like mentioned before, I did join as a student in the federal public service as an FSWEP student, and I was so grateful for that time. And I really took that to my advantage to make sure I knew what I wanted with my career. And with that, I was able to make an informed decision that I wanted to join HR. And so with that, these were the top three things that I thought were the biggest advantages for me when deciding to become an indeterminate employee. So the first thing for me was career development and growth. So knowing that I was going to be in the federal public service with no end date, I had a lot more flexibility to commit to learning new skills and competencies. Not to say that if you are in a fixed contract, you don't have that ability, but with an indeterminate contract, I had the idea to build a long-term plan in terms of my career development and growth, and to understand better what my next steps would be when it comes to reaching my career goals. So that was one of the top priorities for myself when I decided that I wanted to be an indeterminate employee and reach for that goal. The second important point is job stability and financial security. Having an indeterminate contract really provides you, given that it's a contract with no end date, it feels like you're less concerned about what might come next. It gives you a little bit more flexibility on how you want to move, when you want to move. And it also eases that financial security aspect. So you know that there's going to be no end date to your contract, and you know that you can continue working and developing yourself over time to, set a path up for success for yourself. And lastly, creativity and innovation. So I love to tell those who have not worked in the federal public service for very long that there are so many opportunities to grow and develop and learn. And um, I started as a AS, which is an administrative assistant, and now I am a PE, which is a human resources advisor. And at the beginning, when I was a student, I had no idea how much I could grow in my career because I wasn't doing my research, but now that I do know and I am doing my research, I had so much space to be creative and innovative. I had that flexibility. I knew that if I had an idea, I could share it, and I had the time to work on projects and really do the best work that I could. So there's just really so many benefits when it comes to working as an indeterminate employee that it's definitely one of the steps that you should consider when it comes to developing your career with the federal public service. But now that I've shared those opinions with you and why I think it's beneficial to become an indeterminate employee, it is important to understand better what the mechanisms are. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Jennifer, who's going to help you understand better what staffing mechanisms are. Over to you, Jennifer.
Okay, great. Thank you, Priyanka. Great advice as always. Okay, so here we have a lot of terminology, a lot of words that are used related to staffing processes, and I know it can often be confusing. Priyanka did a good job of already clarifying the difference between indeterminate and determinate employees. And as she stated, I'm sure a lot of people on this call are term employees looking to become indeterminate. So you're well familiar with those terminologies. I'm going to try and just break it down. That's more in terms of tenure. That's what we call tenure, not really a staffing mechanism. The staffing mechanisms that are listed here in the graph on the screen are deployment, assignments, secondments, and actings. And actings under 4 months are really ways to move around employees, but they're not considered appointments. So they're a great way to get some of that experience that Priyanka was referring to in your departments, even as a term employee, just different kinds of work that you can get experience with. The difference between them all is that a deployment is a permanent move to another position. So the rest, as I said, are temporary, but all great ways to gain additional experience. Oftentimes in these sessions, I find there's a lot of confusion by applicants between what's the difference between an assignment and a secondment. So they're basically the exact same thing, except your assignment is within your organization and a secondment is outside of your organization. So it's a temporary move. Once again, like different things might come up in your organization where if you're talking with your manager, you see an opportunity to work on a project or fill in on a temporary basis to gain that experience. And Robert will go into more detail in subsequent slides about having those conversations with your manager and trying to identify those areas where you'd like to develop, especially if you're trying to become indeterminate, because you're going to look at posters and you're going to look at what's happening in your organization, and you're going to try and identify what you want to work on, what you think you need to work on to achieve that indeterminate position that you're looking for. The other thing with assignments and secondments, of course, or any temporary moves, is they do require the approval of your substantive manager. So that is the manager of the position that's on your letter of offer. So your actual position that you occupy. So that's why these important conversations with your manager are so important to kind of identify what you want to work on and what your goals are. For types of appointment processes, we have in the lower corner in the blue, we have advertised or non-advertised. And I know that we'll probably have a lot of questions. And I see that 65% of you in the poll said you have little knowledge. So I'm thinking that I will wait till get into more details in the question and answer period as what do you want to know about advertised versus non-advertised. And that's really delegated to departments and managers as to whether or not they want to advertise or not advertise a position that they're about to fill. And a really great way to kind of get a pulse on what's happening in the public service is to use GC Jobs to look at the notifications, because you will see whether it's non-advertised or advertised and get a kind of an idea what's happening. The other step for hiring managers is knowing whether they're going to advertise externally or internally. So that's not included in this graph on this chart, but it's just a staffing kind of rule, I guess, or decision that a manager has to make that's related to whether they advertise or not. So when they make the decision to advertise, are they going to do it externally or internally? And it's important for you as an applicant to be watching both if you are not indeterminate, because some posters will be advertised to the public and some will be internal. So you'll have to always, set your job alerts up to make sure that you're seeing all of those. I think for that slide, that's the definitions are there. They're pretty self-explanatory. So the complexity of the GC hiring process. Okay, so it takes a long time. And in average, up at the point of this slide, it was 227 days, but I'm happy to report that the Public Service Commission just released the annual report on the state of the public service for 22-23, and now we are down to 220 days, which as a median across the public service is a big improvement. I forget the percentage because math is not my thing, but it's a tracking in the right direction, and we collectively are working together across HR and managers and departments to reduce that, because we know the challenges it is for managers and for applicants that it can take so long. It takes on average 195 days for an internal process currently, just for your information. And there is a goal to get that down to 167 days by March of 2025 for external processes. So, you're asking, well, why? Why does it take so long? What is the issue? Well, it depends on many, many factors. There are a lot of factors that go into running a staffing process, and through the years, the many years of public service that I've had as a hiring manager or as an HR advisor to a hiring manager, I could give you multiple examples of, you're really on track and you have it planned and it's all planned out and you're going to get it done, and then just something happens, some sort of delay. But basically, some of the bigger challenges are volume management. So for example, if the process is external, you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of applicants. There is no AI or special background kind of trick to screening those applicants. It's done by human beings. So, more than one human being. So that takes time. We also have to schedule assessments, schedule around the time of the applicants and of the screening board, and all of those life things that happen that can delay those processes are part of what can sometimes make it a bit longer. And even the initial step of deciding, as we mentioned earlier, on the mechanism and how you're going to advertise it, it all comes at the first part. And sometimes if you haven't anticipated the vacancy, it can take longer. So if I know I have an employee who's about to retire, that's easier. I can say, okay, so-and-so is retiring 6 months from now, and I can kind of plan for that and, talk with my colleagues. I can see what's out there and kind of prepare for that. But if one of my employees is lucky enough to get a promotion and they're moving on, I'll be happy for them, but that vacancy will be not expected. And now I have to kind of do a little bit more legwork to see what is the right move and the right decision for us at that time. And it's really situational by a lot of factors and takes some time. What can managers do to reduce time to staff? There's a lot of things, but one of the things that we recommend is using or sharing pools, like opening them to other departments. So I'm sure this will probably be a question later. It's often something is like, what's the value of being in a pool? Well, more and more, we see that departments are opening their pools to say, well, I've created this pool. I did all this work to create this pool of semi or partially or fully qualified applicants. And so, I would like to see them be appointed. So if I can't appoint them and you want to use my pool, for me, I would be open to that. The other thing is the Public Service Commission also has multiple pools of partially qualified, sometimes fully qualified candidates that managers can decide to utilize. So when you are, Robert, I know will speak to that more about getting into pools in more detail in a few minutes, but yeah, it's the pool for that position, and it's worth it to do the work to get into the pools. Even if you're not hired initially, you're in that pool you never know what's going to happen in terms of that organization or others if going forward. So maybe the intent of the process is to fill one position at that time, but that can change because people get promoted, people retire, people move around. So never underestimate the importance of seeing a process through and getting yourself out there into many processes as you can. I think for that time to staff, I think that's the main points on time to staff. I think now we're ready to pass it over to my colleague, Robert, here in Halifax. I'm also in Halifax, to give you some more ideas on how you can navigate this complex process.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Priyanka. For those of you who don't have a visual, I'm a middle-aged white guy who has salt and pepper hair on the top of my head and facial hair as well, and it shows that I've been around, which is why I'm here, actually. It's because I'm not 1 foot out the door, not even close. I still enjoy being a public servant, and that's why I'm here to participate in boot camp. Joining you from, as Jen said, Mi'kma'ki, so Nova Scotia on the East Coast. Glad to be here. Their questions in the Q&A are really, really good. There's a weird vibe there because of the time we are in, 2024. I want us to get there, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to go clockwise for everybody. So on the slide, the first one at 12 o'clock is get in pools. I cannot tell you how important that is. And I know it's work. Trust me, everybody. I know it's tedious. There are ways to make it less work because often we're looking for the same competencies across multiple pools. You can cut and paste. It also doesn't have to be pretty. It's going into a system that doesn't care how pretty it is. So you can simplify things for you. And we can talk about that later if we need to. But I want to say something about pools is that once you're in the pool, it's incumbent on you, I think, to let folks know that you're in pools, right? I'm a hiring manager and I have a bit of a rotation on my team because some of those junior positions, people get poached and stolen from me, and that's good. I don't mind. And Jen knows my positions well, and we share in the region some of the talent. But I don't necessarily want to start up a new process myself as a hiring manager. So if you are doing your networking, if you are in pools, partially qualified, fully qualified, it doesn't matter to me. When you do the networking bit and let me know that you're in pools, that's doing half the work for me because then I can look into the pool. Can I access it? Is it one of those ones that still has folks in it? Does it match the merit criteria that I'm looking at for my position? And so that's the important thing, is to keep track of the pools that you're in, get in as many as you can, and let people know, because just you knowing serves no purpose. You have to let me, the hiring manager, know that you're in that pool. That takes me to the next thing on this slide, which is going clockwise, networking and social media. I know it sounds like a cliche, and I don't want it to sound like one, but networking truly does matter. Every position that I've been in through my career, I've competed for it and qualified. No worries there, everybody. But I learned about it in most cases because somebody told me about it, not because I was on GC jobs every single day. I had work to do. That's not my thing. But somebody said, hey, there's a thing coming up. Hey, did you know about somebody going off to have her baby? Hey, did you hear about that program over there? That's how networking truly works. So there's different ways to network, right? There's some mentioned there. LinkedIn, obviously. Somebody who's attending this session today contacted me on LinkedIn. I actually answered because he did the right thing and mentioned that he was from around here and we did have a similar background. That's how you hook me in, quite honestly, right? GC tools, yeah. GC Connects, GCpedia, all the GC collabs, you name it. We're here in Zoom today. But it is important to subscribe to those things. And I'll admit, I get, I don't know, a few dozen email every day that are kind of junky, but not always. Sometimes there's one or two things in there. Somebody will have a posting and it may be career related. It might just be about a policy that I'm interested in. But someday, somehow, you are going to click on one of those things that's going to lead you to learning about somebody in the system, in another department likely, who you're going to go, I better look them up on LinkedIn, or maybe I'll just email them and say, hey, I see that you're working on this thing. I'm interested. That's a great way to network. And people honestly are open to being contacted, most of us anyway. And if they're not, you don't want to work for them, do you? Right? That's the thing that you have to remember. Facebook groups. I'm not on Facebook at all, but I know a lot of you are. And I know that Facebook, particularly in the National Capital Region, is a hotbed of activity when it comes to networking and learning about opportunities. So yeah, I've seen the light. I'm not going to join Facebook, but I know that many of you are making really good use of it. So if you aren't in the right groups, again, ask your colleagues, ask your friends, ask folks who are in similar positions as you about which of those groups are actually producing interesting content for you to track down and follow, because it's all about knowing who posted it and can I contact them and should I, right? It's not about necessarily seeing something good every day, but seeing the right things at the right time. And the last thing that's in that list is the in-person mixers and events. And it's true that for those of you who are in smaller centers, and I work with many of you, it's not the same as being in the National Capital Region. It's not the same as being in Montreal. It's not even the same as being in Moncton or Halifax or Edmonton. But still, there are networks, there are groups that work together, there are things that you can volunteer for, like GCWCC. I know we talk about it all the time, but that's a great entry point to getting invited to meetings, perhaps in person or virtually, where you get connected to other people who perhaps may have information for you to help you learn about that next opportunity. I'm going to go around this clock to the next thing that's on the slide, your reputation. Yeah, it matters, and it follows you, and it will follow you for your career. And yes, also you can change your reputation. It's not going to be the same forever. But I know that a lot of people tell you this, and I'll tell you the same thing. Do your job now that you're in, if it's for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, or whether perhaps you're indeterminate in that position, but you still have aspirations to move along to the next thing, doesn't matter where you're at, do a good job, because I will have to give you a reference and you will want to provide my name as a reference if I'm your supervisor. So take that as a step and really do a crackerjack job on doing everything that's required of you, and perhaps even a little bit more, right? Raise your hand for the extra bits if that helps, because your reputation does matter, and there are a limited number of opportunities for more people than can fit those opportunities in most cases. So, if I've heard of you, perhaps I'll actually even reach out to you, and I have, and many people have reached out to me over my career as well. Your reputation does get around if it's good. Not necessarily if it's bad, by the way, but the people who are great workers, who are keen, who are ambitious, we know who those people are. And when I have a vacancy, I'm going to reach out to them before somebody I haven't heard of before. That's just common sense, right? So work on your reputation internally and externally. The next one on this slide is job searching. So this is the obvious one, right? GC jobs is still the place to be. You still have to apply for lots of those, most of the positions through that mechanism. There are internal things as well that may not be up on GC jobs. There's lots of different places to find stuff, but that still is the big place. And as I said, if you're actively there with your alerts that come into your inbox every day, you're going to be clicking on those and following up and taking a look at the statements of merit and all the rest of it. But it also may be the case that somebody else saw something and sent it to you. So pay attention to your networks and have them be looking out for you. And somebody just sent me something the other day and said, hey, this looks like your job. It wasn't, thankfully, but it is that kind of thing where when you're well networked, people actually do help you do the looking, and you can do the same for them. 2 more to go on this slide. The next one is skills development. Yep, Canada School of Public Service. I'm former from there, so I can't tell you enough good about it. There's a lot of relevant courses for all of us, regardless of which agency or department that you're working in, and they're free. Some of them are in person, lit virtually, and some of them actually take place in classrooms nowadays. But you know what? Just to be honest, as a manager, that's not the stuff that I notice as much as the other stuff, because we all have to do the online courses. If you tell me that you have this course, that course, then another, I'm like, Yeah, so do I. Like we all have to. That's less interesting than the other stuff. So it's about the things that you learn on the job, right? And think about those statement of merit criteria that you often see. Taking initiative, the ability to juggle competing priorities or whatever it is. Um, there's not a course at the Canada School of Public Service on juggling competing priorities. As much as people would like for a course to be there to teach you that, that's something that you learn through demonstrating good behaviors of juggling competing priorities. So that's the thing where if you don't have the opportunity to do that kind of thing on a day-to-day basis, you can volunteer, you can become part of a committee, you can join a network, that kind of thing. And that way you can then have those skills so that you can then compete a little bit more effectively for that next position and secure that pathway that you're looking for. So it really is important to keep up with your skills. But again, I'll say it, um, the free stuff is great, but most of the stuff is experiential, in my opinion. You don't need an MBA. You don't need to pay for an expensive course outside the public service either. What I value as a manager is your experience inside and showing me that you know the kinds of competencies that I'm looking for. Last thing on this slide is your manager. And don't let me or anybody else ever tell you that your manager is responsible for your career, because that would be a bad idea. That being said, I can certainly help you, right? As your manager, yes, I'm there to advocate for you. And I do. If you have aspirations, if you're looking for things, if you're ready to grow and spread your wings, sure, I'll sell you if you have a great reputation and if I think you have the skills and if I think you're ready. So let's talk about that, not just twice a year at the performance management cycle, but let's talk about that all the time during our bilats. And let's figure out, okay, what is your learning plan? What are your actual strategies that are helping you to get those things on your learning plan? What kinds of tasks are we taking care of on our team that can help develop you as an employee? There's stretch things that we can do. There's little micro missions that I might be able to kind of volunteer your name for the next time I go to an executive committee meeting. And maybe I can say, you know what, I'm willing to let this person go for a few hours a week for a couple of months if somebody has something that will develop this last skill that they're kind of missing in their toolbox. So absolutely work with me and help me figure out where you might be able to go, but also let's be realistic, right? We're not going to get you from here to here in a month. We're going to get you from here to here perhaps in the next 6 months, right? We have to be realistic. And one of the items that's in that list, of course, is a good one, right? I mentioned micro missions, but there's also the actings and the secondments and all of that. Yeah, it's a headache for me because all of a sudden I have a vacancy and now I got to backfill you and it's a problem. But if you have a good relationship with me, I will definitely support you. And that's the whole goal. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll quickly just hit on this before we go to the Q&A. There's so much good stuff there, Jen and Priyanka, you have no idea. Yeah, so let's imagine you've moved forward, you have your indeterminate offer, now what? Yeah, same thing, right? I'm here to tell you that the story doesn't change once you're indeterminate, and it didn't for me, right? I started as a term, and old days, it was a whole different thing than it even is now. Term, 6 times, then I got indeterminate. I still kept my eye on the prize, and I still had aspirations to move forward. So really nothing changes, which brings us back to a couple of things I just mentioned. It is about your reputation. It is about making sure that everything you do well. Everything you do, you brag about a little bit, right? In the right way. And let people know how good you are and how ready you are to get even better. And keep track of those things, right? Keep your little folder, keep your file, keep your brag book updated with the skills that you're developing, the competencies that you're acquiring, the experiences that you have, the nice little emails that don't get sent often enough. I do keep a little folder of those for myself, and I tell all my employees to do the same, because someday you're going to want to read that and say, oh yeah, I am pretty good actually. And I forgot that I did that cool thing. I'm going to use that when I go to my interview, because that is a really good example. That was a year ago. It's still relevant. And that's it. Make sure that you keep a good track of how well you're doing and how well you will do in your next phase. So I'm going to stop there because we need to get to the Q&A. There's good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was so insightful. So we'll move on to questions now from the audience, of which you may use the Q&A function. Please remember that you can vote for the questions you like by using the thumbs up. So let's get straight to it. Please answer questions as quickly as possible. This is for the panelists, so that we can cover as much as possible. I will ask the question and one panelist will answer at each time. And others can add to the discussion if we can keep it moving and it's not too long. All right, so let's get some questions in. All right, so I'll start off with what I see at the top. So the first question we have is it true if you are a term for 3 years with no breaks in service, you will automatically roll over to indeterminate? And if so, how does that process work? I'll pass it to Robert, considering you've been with government for quite a while, or Priyanka?
I think Jen might be able to be the best person to answer that question, so I'll pass it to her first.
Okay, over to Jen.
So it's been a while since I've been in that situation. I'd have to actually look where it is right now, but there is, yes, a term to indeterminate rollover after 3 years. It is a thing, but also the last time that I was kind of involved in those situations, there were some departments that have an exclusion or some kind of agreement where I don't know that I can't think of the term for it now, but kind of they put an order in to stop the rollovers. So I couldn't comment right now if all departments have that or only certain ones. But if you Google search term to indeterminate rollover, you'll find more information on. And then I would ask your manager or your HR person in your own department what the policy or situation is regarding rollovers right now in that department. Personally, Robert, you agree? Yeah. Okay.
I do see. If you read the directive on term employment, which was updated latest 2020, so 4 years ago, things could have changed from then. So I do a little bit more research and of course ask your manager and discuss with your manager. But yes, I can confirm what you've said so far. Yeah.
Awesome. I didn't even know that, so I just learned something today. Another interesting question that we saw was that, with current budget cuts, should employees be concerned about indeterminate opportunities based on the current situation?
I can jump in on that if you want. Because there were lots of questions that I could see coming in about the current and upcoming restraint, I think is a fair way to put it. I've been around for 25 years, and this is not the first time I've seen it, and it won't be the last, because I'm going to be around to see another cycle, I'm sure. And yes, I think the answer is yes. I don't think that this is a panic moment, but I think this is a moment where there will be likely fewer opportunities for us all, right? Because we did grow a lot during the pandemic. Proportionally, we grew a whole lot. And I don't think that's sustainable. And I think the government realizes that. And I think most of our senior leadership is working on ways to save. But that being said, I want everybody to know that we collectively across the public service don't enjoy this, and we don't go into this with the goal of cutting positions. That being said, it is something that often happens. And so, yeah, I think there will be fewer positions probably available to us in the next short bit. But I don't think we're going to shut down anything, right? We are a big organization that has important work to do on behalf of Canadians. And we are massive, right? Hundreds of thousands of people. So I don't think anybody should panic yet. But I do think that people should perhaps be realistic about it.
And if I could just add, I I sort of kind of gauge what's happening. I do look at GC jobs on a regular basis for notice of considerations and appointments. So you can still see that there's lots of appointments happening in lots of departments. So people are still getting appointed. So I wouldn't be discouraged in that way. I agree with everything Robert said. But it's just sort of kind of look at the lay of the land and see the departments where they predict more attrition, more retirements, operational departments that are always going to need people to replace, look at the demographics even in your own region. So, in Robert's and our region, it's maybe we're a little older and maybe there'll be more. So, there's always, it's just sort of the more you can be informed, as we've all said, the more you can look at what departments and where the opportunities are, the better off you will be. And also just working on your own skill set, looking at those posters and seeing the current kind of appointments that are happening. What are they? What's the merit criteria? What have they been? What are departments looking for? And just try to make sure that you have those skill sets.
And one quick point, for those of you who haven't been with government or with the public service for more than one election cycle, it's very normal that different governments have different priorities. So, it is important for you to pay attention to mandates and priorities. And so I have seen over time that certain departments with certain governments grow a little bit while other departments become a little bit less important. And that's normal because of the political platform of that party that's in power, and we serve them all equally. So it is important, to pay attention to the news, and perhaps if there's a department that you hadn't considered before, but it looks like that department might get a budget boost and other departments might get a budget reduction or a flat line, start thinking about how your skills transfer over to that department.
Awesome, thanks. So this is an interesting one. The question is, myth or fact? Cold calling GC hiring managers is not an effective way to obtain an indeterminate position, whether that is through LinkedIn, GC Connects, Career Marketplace, email, or phone call. What do the panelists think about this?
I can start because we often get these questions from students about sending cold emails. I don't know how many students have done cold calls recently. Most of the time it's just emails, or messages on LinkedIn or some sort of social media platform. I don't have statistics to say whether it is a myth or a fact. What I can say is that we touched on networking, and a part of networking is making connections with people who could be your mentors, guide you in your career path, and so on. So if you were to decide that you would like to send a message to somebody on a social media platform that you connect with, who you think could be your mentor, who you think could answer your questions and guide you in your career, I would absolutely send a message to that person. The only guidance I want to give all of you, if you decide to do that, is make sure your message is meaningful. Do not send your resume and expect them to save it and then contact you. That is not how that works. You want to have a connection with the person, whether you've met them or not. Do a little bit of research about that person. If you're finding them on LinkedIn, make sure you connect with them. Maybe it's your education that you connect with for them, the school you went to, the job that they do, the experiences that they have. Include that in your message because it will give you a better chance of actually receiving a response. And don't get disheartened if you don't get responses from everyone. Not everyone responds, but you never know who you're going to touch and who you're going to reach out to and who might be able to be a mentor in your journey. So I can't say if it's a myth or a fact, but I definitely think it's a good step to take in terms of getting that guidance and support and mentorship in your career. That is what I want to say about that.
That's great, Priyanka. I was going to say, don't call me. And I think across, like, seriously, send an email or do it through a LinkedIn or something. But if you call me just out of the blue, it's part of it's a personality thing, but just that's destabilizing for me. Can't take it. But I did get, just this week, I got 2 emails from people. And I get plenty. And they were interesting to me because they had relevant experience. They probably had done a little bit of research to figure out that I was perhaps somebody they should be contacting. I don't have an opportunity. And in one case, I don't even have that classification that works for me. And there's very few in this town, for heaven's sake. But they had a hook. And I think, Priyanka, you're onto something there, right? do your homework. And the one last tip I'll say is don't send it to like 95 people at once. Use the BCC function in your email because I want to feel special, right? If you're sending it to 95 people, I'm just going to assume that one of the 94 others is going to deal with it and find you a job and not me.
Yeah, I second everything, triple everything you guys are saying. I just like a share really quickly experience I had recently. I feel like the kind of messaging on LinkedIn works for me better because that is a networking platform. So I prefer not a phone call and not an email, but I'm on LinkedIn for a reason, and I want to be in recruitment because I want to help applicants. So a few months ago, a young graduate in somewhere from school in Ontario, we didn't have a connection necessarily, but he looked at the job that I did and asked me if I had a few minutes to give him advice. And just like Priyanka, the way what you're saying is the way he approached it is sort of like, if you have time, I would appreciate it. And it just compelled me. We had a call and I encouraged him and he told me about the pools he was in and everything he's done. And I said, you know what, I have so confident you're going to be a public servant and you're going to be amazing, and just like keep in touch. And one of the most heartwarming things for me is about a month ago, he put a post on LinkedIn. He was appointed indeterminately and he thanked the people that took his calls. And I was like, I'm probably going to work for you someday. So, it was just like, he was humble, he was like patient, and he understood the processes can take long, but he was just open to taking any kind of tips and tricks from people. So it's just, those kind of things, people like Robert and I, not everybody's going to respond and not everybody has time for it, but when we have a passion for helping people get in the public service, you find a couple of people like that and I'm sure you'll get responses.
Awesome. I definitely agree. My network has definitely played a good role in kind of helping me navigate my career. So happy to hear that the panel resonates with that perspective as well. Based on what Jennifer just said, it kind of transitions into a question that I'd like to ask, coming from some of our pre-prepared questions. Could the panel share any sort of success stories of individuals who have successfully transitioned from temporary to permanent roles? I know that Jennifer just shared one. Does anyone else on the panel have some like good stories of people that have really been quite successful in quickly transitioning from a temporary to permanent role? And if Jennifer, if you have any other stories, please do share.
Well, I would like to share my story because I feel like a lot of public servants might start off as students or as casuals, as part-time workers. And there's a lot of fear that comes with that because as a student, you have an end date. You don't know if you're going to get rehired. As a casual, you have a 90-day contract. You don't know if you're going to get another opportunity. And that is the boat that I was in when I first started with the federal public service, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think the best advice I ever got was build your network, do your research, and find someone to help mentor you in your career path at the beginning, because the GC is a very difficult place to navigate. We went through all the types of employment, the appointment processes, tenure, those are terminologies that you don't know when you first join the federal public service. And it threw me off because a lot of you might be like, oh my God, my job is filled with so many acronyms or so many vocabulary words that I haven't ever heard before. And sometimes you hesitate to ask those questions. So the things that helped me be successful in becoming indeterminate was, one, keeping a very open and honest line of communication with my manager. From day one, I did not hesitate to say that I would like to have a career in the federal public service. What do I do? What are the steps that I should be taking? I was still in school. It helped guide me in the decisions I was making in terms of my education, as well as what I knew was going to help me in the future. The second thing was really trying to put myself out there. I was a little bit introverted, scared to go on LinkedIn, scared to go to networking events. So I started off a little slow, and that meant for me really talking to the people around me at work. So understanding the work that was going on around me, to know the different opportunities within the field that I was working in. And it really helped me because I built such an amazing network that's got me to the position that I'm in the last 3.5 years. I've had so many experiences, and I know that I can rely on my network to get so many more. The more I grow, the more my network grows, and the more I have mentors to reach out to say, hey, this is where you're at. What did you do to get there? And how can I do the same? Or what courses should I take? Or what competency should I have? And like Robert and Jennifer have mentioned, throughout this entire session is that things are always changing. So we always have to adapt to that. And that's a benefit of becoming an indeterminate employee, which is that I have the time to adapt to those changes and to learn what types of changes might occur. So really, in my success story, it was my network, it was the research that I did, and the career plan that I built to get to where I'm at and to know and have the confidence that I am going to reach my career goals within a specific time frame. So those are the tips I hope you guys can take away from.
Thank you so much. So I'm cognizant of time, so we're going to have to wrap up. Each of you have been sort of a wealth of knowledge. I know I learned a lot, and I will definitely be going back to look at this recording on the FYN RJFF YouTube page, or to check out the podcast series the next time I have questions about this topic. If you want to know more about any of these topics, check out the CBC 2024 Wiki resource page. So again, to quickly touch on our learning objectives today, we sort of learned about the roles. We understood sort of the key eligibility criteria for becoming a permanent GC employee. We talked about the things that we need to develop to be prepared for a permanent role once it becomes available. And we were encouraged to lead open conversations about our careers with our managers and to share our aspirations. And we discussed how to manage your reputation, communicate about your departures respectfully, and navigate those relationships effectively. We have one final polling question, and the question is, was this session a good use of your time? Yes, no, I don't know. Let us know. And on that note, as you put in your responses, we would like to thank you for joining us today. This does conclude the session for day one. Be sure to join us on Thursday at 1 p.m. ET for another exciting day of CBC. There's also an opportunity to drop into the kiosks and speak with members of the GC community from 3:30 to 4:30. To navigate the expo floor and kiosk booths, go to Expo tab in the lobby menu. You have now entered the expo floor, and then you can begin to move as your avatar and enter your booths. And inside the booths, you'll be able to see the description of the GC community and logo, and you'll also see a meeting space that is a Zoom meeting that a representative from a GC community is hosting, and you can enter that meeting to ask the representative questions. Press the blue to join button to enter the Zoom meeting. The link to all the sessions as well as the networking event can be found on the Zoom events main page. Resources will also be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on your YouTube channel. Thank you to everyone for participating, and I wish you the best on your journey to becoming indeterminate. Know that it's not impossible. It's actually very possible. So speak to your network, let your management know what your aspirations are, and I look forward to working with all of you over the next few years.